Thank you for joining us on Lessons in Leadership. Today, I have with me a longtime friend and coworker, wouldn't be coworker, be co-conspirator, I think sometimes. Amena Moiz. Welcome, Amena. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm looking behind you. Should we call you Batgirl?
No, that's actually from the prior principal, just still up there. I'm too short to reach it, so you know how that goes.
Oh, yes. Oh, man. I told you I was going to keep it professional. I will not make any short jokes on
Thank
this
you.
this recording. Though, yeah, anyways, let's keep it professional. Amina, thank you so much for joining me. Amina is the principal at which school did you say it was?
I'm at Burton Middle School in
Burton
Grand
Middle
Rapids.
School in Grand Rapids. And so just a little history on Amina and I. We go back, gosh, I think I counted up like almost 15 years. We were both assistant principals, deans at Timberland Charter Academy in Muskegon. And Amina's born and raised in Flint, and I've kind of grown up all over the place. And we were like besties at work within a week. It was, I often, and I've talked about you on some of my previous videos before, that we have a conservative white Christian male and a Muslim Indian woman, and you were probably the best coworker I've ever had
Oh,
in my
thank you.
life. And we just worked so well together. And so that was one of the reasons I wanted to have you on today. So thank you for joining me. And so we're going to talk about leadership today. And so let's kind of just jump right in. And I would like to ask you, what type of leadership style do you use or do you subscribe to when you're dealing with your direct reports?
So I really like to be collaborative. That's very, very important to me. It's important when people push back on things that I say. Nobody really likes a yes person. Oh, some people do, I suppose, but
Mm,
I really like to be collaborative, bring things, put them on the table, let everyone kind of share out their perspectives, and try to be as supportive as I can. I'm not necessarily a dictator unless I absolutely have to be,
right.
but more like we come to a decision together as a team.
That makes the most sense, right? Do you ever have to pull that like I'm in charge card and say no, this is the direction that we need to go, even after there's been some collaboration that wants to go opposite direction of what you thought?
Yes, and I have learned a lot. So in all my years, like I've made a ton of mistakes, and one of them was exactly what you just said. We had a collaborative session, and I still went in the opposite direction than what the team was suggesting, and it did not go well for me at all. And if I
Mm,
could go back and redo it, I would.
mm, mm. And then I'm guessing you probably lost some of the trust of the team because you didn't go with what they thought.
So interestingly enough, we were really tight.
Mm,
So I didn't get a sense of that. I know they were very surprised that I still wanted to kind of push through. And then we, after everything did not go as planned, we sat down and we kind of talked through it and identified the things that went wrong and the decision I really should have made, and then the consequences of not making that decision. So we had a very honest conversation around that, which
yeah.
strengthened us, I think, even further.
Well, yeah, and I've talked about that with some other leaders as well. And when a leader is able to take some of that humble pie and process that and accept that responsibility, yeah, it sucks, but it can really strengthen the members of the team as well because they see that, wow, okay, they're really invested. They're taking ownership for that. Yeah.
Yeah, not one of my greatest moments, but I learned a lot.
Well, but that also shapes you. And it sounds like, when you talk about when people make mistakes, it's how they correct the mistake that really proves their character. And it sounds like that's what you did well.
I hope so. Taking my learnings to my new job. So yeah, fingers crossed.
So I guess building on that thought, how do you build team cohesion?
I think it's trying to, like, for example, right now I'm at a new building.
Hmm.
Team was already in place. So learning who they are as people, trying to get to know them. It's been interesting because I started when the kids started, so I didn't have like
Mm,
time with them beforehand to be able to make those connections and build that cohesion. So it's been, the saying, drinking out of a fire hose, but maybe
yes.
three of them at the same time. Yep. So it's been like that. So I've been learning my team as we're going through the daily ins and outs of running a building. So it's taken longer for
Hmm.
sure, but we are slowly building trust with one another. And I
Yeah.
think it's bringing new ideas to the table, trying to get their input, trusting that they've been here a lot longer than me. And that's one thing I could say now that I didn't put enough thought into in my prior position, and just trusting what they're saying, like, hey, if we do this, this will happen.
Mm.
And and I think that, I mean, Todd, you were great at building relationships. That was your jam. So then that's a big part of being in this, a huge part of being in this position, especially with the teachers.
Yeah. Do you have a like a go-to move that you use with people when you're trying to build relationships with them?
So I do this tell me about yourself, like a Google form, which
Hmm.
asks questions about them and their families, pets, their likes, dislikes. So I like to pull from that and like learn about their family or ask about their kids or if they're sick. So again, trying to be professional but on a personal level.
Yeah, yeah. I call those water cooler conversations. And it's so important for your staff to see you in a light that is not 100% professional all the time, where you can just walk up and be like, "Hey, man, can you believe the Steelers won that game last night? You don't even know who the Steelers are. Who cares? But they
That
care.
was
So
that was
ask
a good
them."
game.
Yeah. I went to bed at halftime. I turned into a pumpkin around 9:30.
It was good. It was really good, but
So you're still staying up late, I see.
yes, occasionally. I have gotten better. That is one thing that I'm definitely working on, is getting the appropriate hours of sleep that is needed to function.
It seems to increase. Like my bedtime seems to get earlier and earlier each year. And it's like, man, I feel like an old man. Where's my slippers?
We're getting older, Todd. That's what it is.
Yes, before just for the people who are watching this, Amina and I have known each other's children for as long as we've known each other, and we were going back and like, oh my gosh, your son is married, my daughter is a senior. Yeah, crazy stuff. So let me dive into one of the things that I think made our relationship so unique. Is we talked about this before, and I'm a conservative white Christian man, and you're a Muslim Indian woman, and yet we formed this incredible working relationship. And oftentimes, I mean, aside from like food, I think we agreed on just about everything. And it was great working with you in that sense. So, how do you work with an ethnically diverse staff, and how do you form relationships across some of those cultural boundaries? Because that's something that I think you and I were both really good at.
So I think there's a phrase I learned from a mentor at my prior school district, and it was trying to look through their lens and their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So we did this activity that we had our DEI director work with our staff, not here, at a different school. And it was this, just making a bracelet out of beads. And there were questions like, what was the primary ethnicity of the people you grew up with, your best
Mm-hmm.
friend, your neighborhood, just things like that. And in my mind, when we were doing that, I was like, oh, this is going to be great. And people are going to be able to, it's a visual, right? Be able to see how they kind of grew up, acknowledge where they are, and then maybe how to kind of move forward. What I didn't realize would happen is people got defensive. So
Really?
school was diverse. And the idea, the premise behind the activity was, let's acknowledge who we are, where we are, understand we are who we are because of the people around us and how we grew up. And then how do we, seeing other people's bracelets and how they grew up, how do we form this community
Mm.
within ourselves, the staff, as well as the classroom? And yeah, people started to get defensive of that. So it was interesting learning for me. Like, not everyone is open
Mm-hmm.
to that thinking. So another activity we tried was having students kind of share out. They got together and we did like at a staff meeting, we had them share out with our social worker kind of facilitating how they're feeling about certain things happening in the classroom. And an unintended consequence of that was that teachers were feeling kind of beat down, that they
Mm,
felt like students were very critical of them, but the objective behind it was so that students felt like they were heard and had a voice
mm,
and felt like they could share that with our staff. So it's been, I'm just
mm,
learning like what makes sense, what doesn't. I think hearing a perspective. So, for example, at my last school district, the month of Ramadan, which is a month of fasting for Muslims, was
hmm.
coming around. And we had quite a few Muslim students in our building. So, at a staff meeting, being Muslim, being a practicing Muslim, I talked about, hey, this is what Ramadan is. If you have Muslim athletes, they're not going to eat or drink anything, just something to keep in mind for like the coaches. So
Yeah.
I think that also for people to hear from a person who embodies that is
Hmm.
important just for an understanding. And the feedback from staff was wonderful.
Yeah.
So just trying to connect and trying to not play the blame game or use the word ignorant, but trying to meet people where they are and helping them to just grow a little bit through interactions, experiences, and stories.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's huge. I call it the gift of perspective. And there was a family, I won't say them on camera now, but you'll remember this family from Timberland where you and I both worked together. And there was a girl who was in my class who just was knocking it out of the park. Just that was just what she did. She was a great student and then came in on a Monday and was dark, just like her mood was down, everything was down. And she was like that all week. And I kept talking to her like, hey, what's going on? What's going on? And then finally, somebody told me that her older half brother was staying at their house over the weekend and he sold drugs. And so SWAT raided their house over the weekend. And because, you know, as a sixth grade girl's look now, she didn't look like a sixth grader. She looked like a young woman. And so she had a gun in her face, was put in handcuffs until they figured out that she was only 12 years old. And it was like, oh my gosh, had I known that, I could have really changed your whole week. But I didn't know that. And she wouldn't talk to me about that sort of stuff. But yeah, yeah, just having perspective and, you know, walking a mile in somebody's shoes, which we've heard our entire lives, but we still need to hear it. So let's transition because this might be kind of going off of that same topic. How do you keep a good working environment with your staff and prevent toxic culture from creeping in? Because that's always knocking at the door if you let it.
Yeah. So just pulling from prior experience, addressing toxic culture when you see it, I
Hmm.
think, and holding people accountable, I think is very important. But even prior to that, building that trust is important. So I remember walking into a situation where an adult was sharing how upset they were and talking very openly about everything that they didn't like or appreciate. And I asked to see that person later in private and kind of address the behavior that I heard and saw and asked them the purpose of them sharing that with the group of people that they were sitting with. So a lot of times when people are confronted with that, they either don't know what to say or they get really defensive or they'll
Hmm.
start to question you as well. But the nice thing that happened afterwards is that following school year, that behavior was no longer there. Like that
Hmm.
person, for whatever reason, took it to heart and decided to make that change. And that doesn't happen all the time.
Yeah.
But I think coming in new into a staff that's established or into a building that's been established and having certain things just be expected or things that were allowed to happen that shouldn't have, it's tough trying to hold people accountable. And sometimes it works. In that case, it did. It was really nice, actually. And
Yeah.
me and this other person have a working relationship now, which is wonderful. But holding people accountable is going to be very important. It doesn't always work. It can actually quite spectacularly backfire, as I've also learned. Uh,
Yes.
spectacularly. But that accountability piece is going to be what's really important. Like
Yeah.
holding ourselves as leaders accountable, but holding the people around you accountable as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I've experienced the same thing, and just kind of holding that the goal and the mission and the vision of whatever it is that you're trying to do, kind of as that clarion figure. Like, okay, what you were doing here does not help us accomplish this, and this is where we need to go. So, how can I help you get rid of this so we can all get here together? And most people, 8 times out of 10, will jump on board with that. 2 times out of 10, it's a fight. And then it's like, well, I like to fight. Let's go.
Let's go. Yeah.
So let's turn this into a more positive question. What is or who is one of the best leaders that you've ever worked for? And you can name them or not name them, but describe them at least.
Yeah. Her name is Linda Kane Smith. I met her when she hired me as a middle school science teacher when I was working for NHA, and she was the principal of the school in Flint. And I would just watch her and observe the things she did. She was very strong, very adamant, very stubborn isn't the right word. She just had high expectations of the people around her. And we were
Yeah.
in a building that was 99% free and reduced lunch, like a
Mm.
lot of different challenges. And
So just let me stop you there for a second.
yeah,
Just for the people who are listening, when Amina and I refer to like ratios or percentages of free and reduced lunch, that talks about the level of poverty that is in your school. So 99% free and reduced lunch means 99% of those kids were at or below the poverty line. So please
right.
continue about Linda.
Yeah, Linda was, I don't know, she held to the expectations that she set for us.
Hmm.
But she was also very relational, and that to strike that balance, I have learned is extremely difficult
Mm.
and quite the feat when you get there. And she had gotten there. She had come from Flint Public Schools and had done some work with them, and then came over to National Heritage Academies to be the principal in Flint at that school. And her interactions with students, her interactions with adults, she had us come in on a snow day one time for staff and kind of just had us talk about how we've been feeling, and listening, I think, was also something that she did well. She would listen, but she would still move forward with either something you suggest or like, hey, I hear you, but
Mm.
this is how we're gonna go. So I was with her as a middle school science teacher, and then it's actually because of her I stepped into administration.
Mm.
Random night, I was picking up my husband from the airport in Grand Rapids, and I get a text, and the text said, how do you feel about being a middle school dean or assistant principal? And I
Hmm.
had never, ever, it's been 15 years now since I got that text. I had never even thought about going into administration. So, anyways, went through the process, got the job, but that's who, when other people, outside people, recognize something in you that they see and
Mm.
help kind of grow and foster that, that's why she's my girl. Like,
Mm.
just, I'm still not, like, she's an incredible human being as well, but professionally, I'm still not at her level yet.
Mm.
I still have to strike that balance between relationships and accountability.
Mm, yeah. That is one of my things that I use when I am leading people or doing something. I will go and find something that that person is doing well and say, "Hey, I want you to think about this because this is what I see in you." And when people hear, just like your experience, when people hear like, "Oh, wow, they see that in me," that could be the spark that just launches them to the next leat So, do you still stay in touch with her?
I do. It was
That's
her
cool.
birthday in September. I texted her.
Is she still a principal or is she
Now, she
done?
retired a few years ago. So she's still living in the Flint area, but I used to call her Sassy Sally because she had this one lipstick color that she always wore heels, and she had this one lipstick color that she always wore, and that was my nickname for her.
That's funny. That's funny. What is one of the greatest leadership successes that you've been a part of or that you've initiated yourself?
This one I'm really proud of. It was the concept of standards-based learning, right?
Hmm.
It's Um, there's a rubric to follow. There's usually projects that kind of surround that. It's not necessarily just sticking to the book that you're teaching, but looking at Michigan standards and
Hmm.
actually teaching to them. But outside of that, having a true grading practice, like truly grading students for where they are. So it's not a grade for turning in homework. It's not a
Right.
grade for participation. It's, hey, what have you actually mastered? It took 3 years for us to do it. So it started with a group of teachers reading a book. Then the following year, it was those teachers were like, "Hey, let's actually try this," and they did a pilot.
Hmm.
And then at the end of that pilot year, we had the group of teachers. It was the math team. They shared out everything that they had learned, the roadblocks, the challenges, the things that went well. And then year three, we had the entire middle school implemented. It was a beautiful thing, like
And that was formative assessment as part of that process too, correct?
huge
Yes.
part of that process.
Yes. So all of you who have been watching my videos and heard me talk about formative assessment, it comes from the school system, but it can be applied to just about anything that you want to learn and do. Like, and I've when I talk to people about it, it's like every sports coach in the world uses formative assessment. They just don't know that that's what it's called. That's the process.
And
So,
I think athletes have it best because they get coaching in real time, which is something
yes.
that I think our kids are missing. And what was beautiful about that 3 year journey was that it was a journey. It
Hmm.
wasn't something we jumped in. It couldn't just because of the things that were involved. It was a scaffolded 3 year process to implementation. And the teachers were amazing,
Yeah.
but they had buy-in, right? It was their own group of peers that came together and kind of did this, and that's where the entire middle school team bought into the whole process. It was
Yeah.
amazing.
And that's something that I use with people first coaching and consulting. That's something that I train leader. And that's what I did with a small business I was working with this summer is like real time feedback. Like, hey, you talked to that customer right before they left the store. That was really great. You should have added this part right here. And then that would have knocked it out of the park. Real time feedback, just like that. Now that learning is solidified in their brain and they're ready to go. And I know you are the brain science queen. I've learned so much from you about brain science. So all right, I know your time is short, so let me ask you one more question. This can be positive or negative, can be fun, can be serious, whatever it is.
Okay.
Leadership experience that you've learned the most from, and it doesn't necessarily have to be school related. I know you are, a career educator and administrator, but it doesn't have to be that because sometimes, realizing you're a stupid husband is one of the greatest lessons you can ever learn.
Well, don't
So,
ask Scott this, but yeah, it's whatever. We won't ask him this question. He might give you a whole list. Um,
I got his number, don't worry.
so I have learned that I need to continue learning and growing.
Hmm.
My prior position, I what do they call it? Eating humble pie.
Mm-hmm.
So I had some people give me some real feedback about what they noticed, what they observed, what they saw in terms of growth, what they didn't see in terms of growth, and remembering to keep our students first and remembering why we're here, our passion, our drive, and wanting what's best for them.
Mm.
And that just understanding, listening, and kind of really taking in and reflecting
Hmm.
on the interactions I have, the things I've done, the feedback I've gotten, and taking all of that into this new position that I'm in, trying to do better than what I did last time.
Mm. Man, I'm not even going to add on to that. That was beautiful.
Why, thanks, Todd.
That was great. It really was. I mean, and you and I were talking about this off camera a little bit before, but sometimes life's hardest lessons are the ones that grow us and we learn from the most and that really shape us. So, all right, Amina, I know that you have to go. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it. It was great catching up with you. You look fabulous as always. I love what you're doing with your hair. Um,
Thank you. It took me 2 seconds.
I know. And for those of you who are watching, Amina and I have a relationship in which we can joke and tease each other about these things because there's trust and love built into that. So, but that's the cool thing about having that type of relationship and building that is sometimes you can have fun with that. So, anyways, Amina, thank you so much for joining me. I will end the recording. Please give my blessings and greetings to Scott and your married son. Oh my gosh.
And you can remind Audrey of the clappers if she even remembers it.
Oh, yes. She was asking me this morning. She was like, you're doing your interview with Mrs. Moist today, right? And I was like, yeah, yeah. She's like, I can't wait to watch that one. And yes,
Aw.
the clapper. Yes. So, all right. Fun story time. I hate annoying noises. And Amina gave my daughter one of those little hands that flaps back and forth, like that. She gave her one. And not only one, she gave her a giant one. I don't know.
That's so great.
I know. You thought it was hysterical. I thought it was stupid.
I did. I
Yep.
did. It was fantastic.
She set it down at home and I moved it. And then she asked me where it was. And I was like, I don't know, sweetheart. I don't know. It was literally like, it was like the size of a piece of paper.
It was huge. The clapper was huge. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. And
Well,
then,
I appreciate you having me. Thank you so
yes.
much.
All right. Give my regards to your family. And hopefully we won't make it this long without talking to each other again.
I agree. Have a good one.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'm Todd, and my mission is to equip current and aspiring leaders with the tools, insights, and strategies they need to excel in their roles. Through personalized coaching, cutting-edge leadership development, and tailored consultation services, I help leaders cultivate respect, resilience, and excellence, enabling them to make lasting impacts on their businesses and organizations. If you or someone you know could benefit from this type of growth in their life, let's connect and have a conversation and see if I can help.